Chapter 19 The Ceremony. The fairies sat on branches and vines stretched between the huge trees. Birds and animals gathered around the roots. As evening closed in around them, the light grew brighter. The setting reminded Zach of a candlelit Christmas service he had once gone to as a child. He instinctively knew some sort of magic was going to take place here. As Zach watched them, a single glittering light darted into the circle of ancient trees. Even without seeing her face, he knew it was Krista. Then, from the center of the glowing ring of fairies, Magi Lune appeared, glowing brighter than them all. Everyone was silent as she spoke. "Since the beginning of time, we have been the guardians of this forest. But we have grown lazy.
We have too long forgotten the magic powers of nature. The time has come to call on them again."
She slowly floated down and picked up a tiny seed from the forest floor. She held the seed up for everyone to see. "Remember the power that exists within a single seed. That same power also exists within each and every one of us. It is the power of nature. This is the magic we share with all life." She began to chant, and the seed glowed. Zach held his breath as he watched the glowing seed grow brighter than the fairies, until its dazzling light flowed through Magi, into the earth and up through the trees. Then, the singing started. At first, it was a low hum. Then, one by one, every tree and plant and tiny flower raised its voice and joined in. The forest was filled with their song, a song without words, but full of pride and hope. The ancient beech trees sang in their thunderously deep pipe organ tones, while the small plants chimed with crystalline delicacy. And all the while the seed glowed brighter, revealing its hidden power. The beech trees moved together, closing the gaps that separated them, as if to protect nature's most treasured secret. Zach leapt into the shining circle as the trees twisted shut and plunged the outside forest into darkness. The fairies fluttered into the air, forming their own circle within the enclosed space. They became a swirling column of light. But Krista didn't fly with them. She was mesmerized by the glowing seed. Almost against her will, she found herself being drawn closer to it. Magi smiled and held out the seed to Krista.
"Oh, no, Magi, no. I'm not ready."
"We can't always choose our time, Krista. Your time is now," said Magi, closing Krista's hands around the seed. From the moment she touched the seed, Krista felt different. In that moment, she knew that, like the tiny seed, she too had a hidden power, a magical strength. As she held the seed, the trees sang louder, and the twisting column of fairies spun faster and faster around her. "Look for the hero inside yourself, Krista," Magi Lune was saying in a low voice. "Look to the good and loving heart inside you and all others. For just as every seed holds the power and magic of creation, so too do you and every other creature in this world. Use this power, Krista, to unite and make whole. Use it for the good of all." As Magi spoke, her body slowly dissolved, until all that was left of her was a tiny, intense point of light.
"Magi, don't leave me,"
Krista cried.
I always be with you.
Old life always has to give way to the new, whispered Magi. Remember, Krista, this power is generous. It grows when it is shared. The sparkling light that Magi had become shone over Krista. It shone so brightly that it suddenly exploded into 1,000 twinkling fragments, and everyone who was gathered in the magic circle was struck by the hurtling sparks. In a daze, Krista watched one last magic spark drift down to where Zack stood. It seemed to hover above his head, then it landed in the middle of his forehead, illuminating him in a flash of light. The trees lowered their voices and slowly unwound their trunks. The light from the inner circle now flowed out into the forest, and soon, all that was left of Magi's glowing energy was one sparkling point of light in the center of the Antarctic beech trees. It shone from the seed Krista held in her hand.
Oh, Magi.
Krista cried softly, floating down to the earth. What are we to do, Krista? Asked Gyps, flying towards her. What did Magi say? Whispered Elwood.
That within us all is a magic power that grows when it is shared,
She replied, suddenly realizing all eyes were on her. Everyone seemed to be looking to her for help. Remembering what Magi had just told her, she concentrated her energy on the problem they now all faced. Looking all around, she noticed something odd. The soft pre-dawn light had crept into the forest, but the forest was deadly quiet. Not a single bird chirped. It was an eerie silence. And then they all heard a deep rumbling sound and the ground began to tremble. Through the early morning mist, another, harsher light emerged, blinding them. Zack ran towards Krista. We've got to get everyone out of here, he yelled. It's the leveler! It's coming straight towards us! Before he could reach her, the canopy was savagely ripped apart, and the cruel face of Hexxus leered down at them from above the trees, where he swirled as a furious dark cloud.
Fairies,
He howled, scorching them with his poisonous breath.
care for a bit of fresh air?
No!
Shouted Krista, tucking the glowing seed into her pouch. Without thinking, she darted towards Hexxus, but with one cruel breath, he blew her back against the roots of a beech tree. Krista, move! Yelled Zack, as the trees were lit with a piercing light and the earth crumbled beneath them.
A fairy fortification!
An enormous mechanical arm grabbed the ancient beech trees around their trunks and ripped them from the ground. The trees groaned, and their cries filled the forest. Fairies flew screaming from the scene. Zack ran towards Krista, who was hovering directly in front of the leveler. Krista, come on! He shouted.
I can't move!
She cried, blinded by the unnatural light. Zack was suddenly pushed aside by Pips and Batty. Go away! Yelled Pips. Haven't you done enough, human? Dragging Krista out of the path of the leveler and away from the devastated circle of beech trees, Pips urged her not to look back. With a heartbreaking scream, the rest of the beech trees were uprooted, and Magi's house was smashed in two. All around them, the giant trees fell, dragging more of the canopy with them.
Pips, find Ock and Rock!
Screamed Krista as Hexxus stormed overhead.
Then meet me back at Old High Rise. Whatever happens, we've got to save the heart of the forest!
Do you like my new toy, fairy?
roared Hexxus, snorting up the leveler's fumes and puffing himself up grotesquely.
Let's open up this forest.
He bellowed, scorching the ground with his fiery breath and incinerating a trail of lizards, frogs, and beetles who were scurrying through the undergrowth.
Let's get to the heart of the forest.
He taunted.
Run, fairies, run!
Once again, Krista flew towards him, but once again she was blown back. Hexxus laughed at her foolishness. He reached out with a single black finger and touched the pale fluffy clouds of dawn, turning them into one swirling, thundering black cloud, which unleashed a heavy shower of dark acid rain. It burnt and sizzled the leaves of the few trees still standing. Batty grabbed Krista and Zack and dived for cover, sheltering them both under his wing. When the burning rain stopped falling, Batty told them to hang on tight, and he flapped them back through the forest towards Old High Rise. All the forest creatures were now either running or flying towards the strangler fig tree. Terrified voices filled the air, and the cries of falling trees almost drowned out the roar of the leveler as it turned towards the heart of the forest. For the first time, panic and chaos ruled in FernGully. Krista saw Achen Rock cowering at the root of the strangler fig tree. Her heart went out to Magi's two loyal friends. She hoped someday she could help them understand why Magi had left them. She was relieved to see that old Potsy was alive and huddled next to them, keeping them company. "Krista!" shrieked Blackbeak. "I've moved all the young inside Old High Rise. Rose Myrtle and Granny are in there with them. The rest of us are ready to fight."